Morning, guys. So I am here at the school on September 30th, and I wanted to kind of just go over a couple of things with um, chapter 5 specifically. So you guys are going to be assigned, you have been assigned to read chapter 5 today, and this is a big chapter. It sits right in the middle of the novel. There's 10 chapters altogether, and it follows pretty much spot on the story chart that you guys are familiar with. So there's like the introduction, the rising action, and then the climax. But we're not at the climax yet. It's a kind of a big moment, but one of the biggest things that we get caught up, especially with literature, and once we learn something, is we think that everything has to be linear. All right, so a lot of you are really familiar with the concept of story diagrams, right? Like they look like this. Right, so it's literally just like a story mountain. But Orwell and many novels don't follow that particular parameter. What you want to be aware of is this novel's probably going to look more like this. All right, so there's going to be a couple of little peaks and maybe a little bit of downplaying, and then it's going to go back up again. And we have a big moment that happens in this chapter. There's a coup, basically, an overthrow of power, and it really is an insight into the characters specifically when we look at Napoleon's character. All right, Napoleon is an interesting soul. Anything that Snowball seems to be for, Napoleon is always against. That's established either in chapter 4 or chapter 3. They agree on nothing, and that's pretty typical of what would have existed at the time, and especially regarding the two people that these characters would have been based off of. If you haven't picked up on it yet, this book isn't about animals at all. It's actually about something way bigger. Think about the web quest that I made you do. I made you look up about a guy named Trotsky and a guy named Lenin, and eventually Stalin. There's the Cheka, there's all these things, and those elements continue to kind of pop up as we move forward. Specifically, the concept of Lenin and Trotsky. Eventually, Lenin kicks Trotsky out of Russia. All right, and so this whole story is really just a parallel to the Russian Revolution specifically. And we're going to see that kind of continue to play out here. All right, so when we look at chapter 5 specifically, we see characters are leaving, characters are being run off the farm. There's the concept of the windmill is introduced. Now, the windmill is symbolic as well, and it's going to come up again and again and again, especially as we kind of move throughout the novel. The windmill is definitely meant to represent like a city of some kind or a place and an idea. And as you kind of read along, don't be surprised if you find that the windmill kind of becomes one of those central concepts within our novel. We see changes made to the establishment that was put in place when the animals first took over. The character chart has a chart that exists underneath all of the characters, and you should have pretty much everybody filled in at this point, with the exception of Mr. Whimper, maybe. And the big thing that you need to take away from that character chart is that all of the rules established when the animals first took over the farm will be overthrown at some point. All right. And so what I mean by this is we had the principles of animalism as determined by Old Major in his original speech, the original 10. And then they kind of reduced it down to about 7 when they took over the farm and established their new kind of government on the farm, because they had to establish a way to rule the farm. And then as we're going to continue forward, we're going to see constantly the concept of each rule they initially established broken. So if you look at page, I think it's 24, at some point an animal will drink alcohol, at some point an animal will wear clothes, at some point an animal will kill another animal. And the initial concept regarding animalism basically is thrown out the window, but slowly, so that the animals on the farm don't realize until probably it's too late that they've given up all of their freedom. All right, and chapter 5 is a big part of that, and so I want you to be aware of that as you kind of move through it. There's also the introduction of intimidation on the farm, and so kind of keep an eye out for that and how Napoleon and the other animals utilize intimidation to get the animals to do what they want. Orwell pretty much establishes early on, I think it's within the first chapter, that the pigs are smart and the rest of the animals are dumb. I mean, look at a boxer, well loved, well respected, but at the end of the day, he's still dumb. I mean, and Orwell makes a point to tell us that. I mean, at one point, Boxer tries to memorize the alphabet, and he's taught A, B, C, D, and then he tries to learn the next 4 letters and forgets the first 4 that he learned. All right, so there's a reason that he establishes that the pigs are very smart, but the rest of the animals are very dumb. Think about how meetings typically go. How does voting go at these meetings? All right, and as we move forward, pay attention to how the pigs had established themselves as the rulers from the very beginning. All right, because that's going to be one of the biggest takeaways when we move forward. All right, so as you get ready to read chapter 5, keep an eye out for some big stuff that's going to happen. There's other stuff that's going to get even bigger. Chapter 6 and chapter 7 have quite a bit coming your way. Chapter 8's huge. Chapter 9 the same. So don't be afraid to think a little bit more deeper about this. This isn't about pigs and horses and stuff like that. This is about a real event, a real life, a real situation that existed within the world. And each of the animals that we're going to experience really do parallel somebody we see later on. And we're going to talk about that more on Friday. All right, so have a great day. Make sure you're reading chapter 5, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.